Hold on to your butts.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 99 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Even though the sky isn't all purple and people are not running everywhere, I am joined as always by my co-host Mary, who is always ready to party like it's episode 99. I am merely a broken down little red Corvette named Darren. Hey, Mary, how are you?
Oh my God, that was the most random.
Never mind. Never mind. You're obviously not a Prince fan, but it's okay.
No, I am a Prince fan. I was just like, was not expecting that.
So what's going on? Off to a great start as always. How you doing?
Well, we just had a really great roundtable with everybody, so that was pretty cool. Our
We
monthly
did.
roundtable, which we have every month.
No,
Obviously.
it was great conversation, talking about a bunch of different things, a lot of cool people. We always have a lot of fun with that. So what's going on? What else is going on?
So we're at episode 99, which, I mean, we've been talking about like, well, here we are. We put up with each other for 99 episodes.
I could have gone with 99 Luft balloons if you would have got that.
Yes, I did. I know the Prince song, and I know that one.
Oh my goodness gracious! You need some culture on you. But any case,
I know both
obviously,
that references.
Anyway, so I can't believe you didn't get that.
I did.
But anyway, so we got some fun today. This is episode 99. We're almost at 100, so we're gonna have a lot of fun today. We got some fun stuff to talk about in just a second. But I am the host, so I will do the honors here, and I will ask you, of course, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, I am drinking Ski the East, which is a IPA from I should know this. It's from Long Trail Brewing in Vermont, which Vermont, if anybody knows their IPA history, that's where the original hazy IPA comes from, is Vermont.
Very
England,
good.
New
Very
England
good.
IPA.
Okay. Any mug situations tonight?
Oh,
or?
yes. I am drinking it out of my Battle of Chickamauga mug.
Okay.
Because that is going to figure prominently in, well, not, I shouldn't say prominently, but we are going to be talking about it as part of the episode that we are doing tonight.
Excellent. Very good. Very good.
And what are you drinking, fine sir?
Oh my God! Thank you for asking. I never thought you'd ask.
I always
I am
ask.
I am drinking. It's called Stone FML Fear Movie Lions, and from Stone Brewery, because we're going to talk about Stone's River a little bit, not too much, but that's going to be part of this as well. And since you didn't ask, I will tell you, I'm drinking out of my U.S. Grant mug because he's not the focus of this episode, but he is going to promote himself prominently throughout this episode. So we're going to talk about
no kidding. According to Grant,
Ulysses Grant. So we're going to talk about this. And so today, Mary, I don't know if you know this, but we are going to talk about Williams Rosecrans. Now, this is a guy we've referenced in a bunch of episodes. We talked about him a lot. Stones River, we talked about Tullahoma, we talked about Chickamauga, and this, of course, is William Stark Rosecrans. Now, he's a guy who was, really had a good, we'll talk about him in detail, but he had a really strong beginning to his military career. But for many reasons that we're going to discuss here, he saw his career kind of fall flat due to politics, kind of like Governor K. Warren did. And he never really got over it. Now, Rosecrans was sort of he's sort of a punching bag for some. He's probably not toasted at the annual U.S. Grant Symposium.
I wouldn't think so,
okay.
No. But I mean, he's in some ways, though, Rosecrans, and I mean, I love Rosecrans, in a way like Governor K. Warren, but not as bad. He does he does kind of talk back to his supporters at that time, but at the same time, like, my opinion is Rosecrans needs to be kind of elevated up and a little bit more respected when it comes to discussing the Civil War. Because like you said, he has a very strong beginning. He's got a very strong pre-Civil War career as well, as we're going to talk about. But like you said, it just politics gets involved, as well as, he's not the favorite of some of the, especially one in particular, of one of the stars at the end of the Civil War.
Yeah, and because the stories are good one. Now, Rosecrans not without his flaws. We're not going to sit here and say that. But I think his story is a good one. But so a lot of people want to know who is this guy? He's just not a mainstream type of guy. William Stark Rosecrans was born in Kingston Township, Ohio, which is just outside of Columbus, Ohio, which is not far from where the Michigan Wolverines beat the Buckeyes this last fall. By the way, just want to get that out there. But his father was Crandall Rosecrans, who was a War of 1812 veteran. He served as an adjutant to the general and future President William Henry Harrison. Rosecrans' mother was a descendant of Stephen Hopkins, who was the signer of the Declaration of Independence from right down the street here in Rhode Island, Mary.
Nice.
So he had some blue blood in him. He grew up at a farm and had very little schooling, but he did learn how to read, and so he spent much of his youth, reading, and kind of like Lincoln, if you could think about that.
Yep.
And Rosecrans was poor, so so paying for college was going to be a big deal for him.
Yep.
You know, and for that reason, Rosecrans tried to gain appointment to West Point, where he was successful gaining that position, and he'd be part of that star-studded class of 1842. We talked about Abner Doubleday, Earl Van Dorn from last time, and
Yep.
his future Chickamauga combatant James Longstreet.
Yes. Yeah, he's with there all the time. And it's really interesting how Rosecrans gets into West Point because he's working in Mansfield, Ohio for a time, which is funny. I believe that is also one of the spots where one of his rivals, he will become a rival, Stanton, future Secretary of War, has a law practice. Anyway, Rosecrans was a driver for a guy named T.W. Bartley, who was a future Supreme Court Justice of Ohio, or Supreme Court Judge of Ohio. And Rosecrans really impressed him with how intelligent and conversational he was as a teenager. And Bartley really urged him to get a higher education. But as you said, Rosecrans and his family are poor and they can't, they can't make it work. So Rosecrans and his father start corresponding with Congressman Alexander Harper from their district, and as you said, he ends up getting that appointment at West Point, and he's part of that class that has, it's got Longstreet, Doubleday, D.H. Hill, Earl Van Dorn, McLaws, Gustavus Smith. All these guys are part of this class.
Yeah, he finds himself in a class, and in that class, he's going to end up graduating fifth
Mm-hmm.
in that entire class. And while he's at West Point, he's going to become close friends with a cadet named U.S. Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. We're going to talk a lot about U.S. Grant now. There's that famous story there back in West Point, back on a cold night in 1839, when Rosecrans, he's going to be listed as a cadet in charge, and one night he's going to come across a young U.S. Grant who was being hazed by his fellow cadets, who's being told to guard a cannon. Just go guard the cannon. And so of course he's going to do it. And Rosecrans is going to relieve him from his cannon duty responsibility. He's going to tell him, it was a prank, and go back to your dorm and go back to bed. And really from that point on, Rosecrans and Grant, they kind of developed a really close and good friendship. And it's unfortunate because later events are going to basically destroy that friendship.
Yep.
And after graduating, his nickname, was Old Rosie. That was the nickname he got.
Yep.
As he was called in school. He was originally, he had a lot of different roles after graduations. He was basically in charge of preparing those sea defenses over there at Fort Monroe
Yep.
in Virginia, and some other things. But, he felt that teaching was in his cards. He had
Yes.
that teaching, that bug. So he's going to return to West Point, and where he's going to teach engineering. And so it's fascinating when you see how his career goes. He didn't go off to Mexico or anything like
No,
that.
he didn't fight there at all.
So he kind of went on a different thing. Now, some things changed along the way. He had a lot of different callings, and one of them happened in 1845 or so, when Rosecrans, who was a lifelong Methodist, is going to convert to Catholicism. And by all accounts, he became extremely pious to the point that he was just difficult to be around because he argued theology all the time. I mean, just you
So he was like Howard.
Well, kind of. I mean, he's driving the West Point staff crazy, who was mostly Protestants.
Mm-hmm.
And his brother Sylvester would go on to become the bishop in Cincinnati in 1861.
Mm-hmm.
So the Catholicism was a real thing with him. And it was interesting because 1851, Rosecrans, he's going to apply for a new job at VMI, Virginia Military Institute. He didn't get the job. And the applicant who did get the job was a guy named Thomas Jackson.
Yeah, I found that so interesting. It's like, okay, TJ.
Well, it's funny how all these guys' lives all kind of come together.
They all intersect and intertwine, and and they're all gonna not be together, but they're all gonna intersect and intertwine to the point where it's still happening during the Civil War as well.
Yeah. Sometime in 1854 or so, Rosecrans is going to quit the army.
Yep.
He's going to quit as a first lieutenant. He's going to join that private sector. Now, the thing about Rosecrans, we mentioned before, he was very self-taught. The dude was smart. He was not he didn't fall off the turnip truck.
No.
He's not some Ontario Canadian resident. I mean, this is a smart guy we're talking about here, Mary. But he
God.
was and we're going to talk about this in detail here in a second. But he was an inventor. He had a bunch of patents,
Hmm.
and you're going to talk about a handful. But his real claim to fame was that developing an enhancement for kerosene for
Yeah.
these lamps. And I know there's a whole bunch of stuff that you researched about that.
Yeah, so like in 1855, he takes over the Canal Coal Company in Coal River in what is now West Virginia. So it would have been West Virginia at the time. In 1856, he becomes president of the Coal River Navigation Company, and in 1857, he becomes part of the Preston Coal Oil Company for manufacture of kerosene. And during this his time off, like from military service, he does earn several patents, including the first kerosene lamp to successfully burn a round wick and a more effective method of manufacturing soap. There's also in 1859. So if you look at pictures of Rosecrans, he often has like almost like a smirk on his face. And there's a reason for that. And I'm talking about the pictures of him during the Civil War. That's because in 1859, he was burned severely when an oil lamp exploded and set the refinery on fire, and he was severely injured. It takes him 18 months to recover from that, and he had facial scars, and he had the appearance of having a perpetual smirk on his face. Um, and when he recovered from those injuries, that was when the Civil War began. But some of the other patents he had, just before we get into the Civil War here, he designed and installed the first complete lock system in what is now West Virginia on the Coal River. Today, it's known as the Coal River Locks, Dams, and Log Booms Archaeological District. He built one of the first oil refineries west of the Allegheny Mountains. And in the early part of the Civil War, he is going to invent what is known as the Rosecrans ambulance as well. And you can see one of those on display in Gettysburg at the name is now escaping me. I said it
And
right.
at
The
the
Spangler
Spangler farm,
Farm. At the Spangler
go
Farm.
see
Thank
our
you.
friend Mark Blanchard over at
Yep.
the Gettysburg Foundation. They have a tour of that. But yeah, he has that 1859. He's the president of that Preston Oil Company,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever happens, a lamp explodes, and like you just said, he's left with that permanent smirk on his
Mm-hmm.
face, and all I could think about was all he needed was a little bit of makeup. He could have been a
The
supervillain.
Joker. The Joker.
Wait till they get a load of me.
Oh God.
He could have done that. And one of the great great roles of Jack Nicholson ever, right?
I hate to think, what does that make Grant? Is Grant like Batman?
I'm not sure, but he could have gone the other way. Just saying. He didn't go to a world of evil.
No, he
But in
didn't.
1861, I don't know if you know this, Mary, but a bunch of people from South Carolina are going to decide to fire on Fort Sumter, and the Civil War is going to begin, and it's going to cause Rosecrans to reenlist as a colonel in the 23rd Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this regiment, obviously, it's star-studded as well, but it includes future President McKinley,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Rutherford B. Hayes. And, Rosecrans is going to get his star on May 16th, 1861, as Brigadier General star,
Yep.
exactly one day before U.S. Grant, which
Yep.
means that Rosecrans is going to have seniority. And he's going to report to General George McClellan in Western Virginia, and he'd be decisive in those battles of Rich Mountain in July of 1861, where Rosecrans is going to lead those forces that are going to be led by John Pegram. He's going to beat him, and he's going to cause Pegram to lose 20% of his men. It was a pretty big victory at the time. It's one that George McClellan happily took credit for, by the way, Mary.
Big time.
It also helped pave the way for the creation of the new state, which will become today West Virginia.
Yeah.
But what I have to think, though, Rosecrans was pretty envious of seeing little Mac's star rise.
Yeah.
Because it certainly did after the adventures they had together in what will become West Virginia.
Yeah.
Rosecrans is interesting, though, because he was a couple of things. He was very popular with his men.
Mm-hmm.
He had a horrific potty mouth, just like you do. I mean, the guy knew a lot of swears.
Which is funny because he's Catholic and he's super, he sounds like he's super religious, but he's got this like, apparently he could swear as much as like Slocum or Andrew Humphreys could.
Well, he did. He was very strict, but he was almost like a father figure for these guys. The thing about Rosecrans, a lot of people don't realize, and people hear this about Chamberlain once in a while. Rosecrans had a really strong stutter. He had a real problem talking,
especially when he got upset, which apparently he had quite the temper on him, and he would like kind of go off on people, but then he would like forget about it, and kind of like things would go back to normal, like nothing happened at all.
Well, they said when he got really upset or really nervous is when it came out. They said he sounded like a duck and they couldn't understand a word he was saying. All I could think of is the
Donald
Donald Duck
Duck.
voice. I can't
God.
do the voice, okay? But they say that's how he sounded.
Oh,
I
poor
always
Rosie.
thought that, maybe that had something to do with Lincoln's old like a duck stuck on the head insult. Maybe because it's the word duck comes
Well,
up
who
again with
knows?
Rosecrans.
Like, because Rosie, like, he did work with Stanton, and we'll talk about this for a period of time before he went to the Western Theater, and obviously they didn't get along, so maybe Stanton, I mean, shady guy, might have said something to him about it.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
You think of how these guys talk, and that was an issue for him.
Mhm.
So the next thing for Rosecrans, he was going to get sent out west. Now, not long before, U.S. Grant is going to be securing Forts Henry and Donelson,
Mhm.
and where soon after Grant is going to see his reputation really unfairly, hit by the envious Henry Halleck in reports of Grant's drunkenness and his incompetence. All these stories came out about Grant, right? And from Halleck. And really, to add to Grant's woes, the only person defending him was William Sherman.
Yeah.
Other subordinates like John McClernand, guys like Lew Wallace, they didn't lift a finger to deny or refute any of these
Honestly,
rumors.
though, I mean, I am Team Lew Wallace. I'm not gonna like blame Wallace for that, considering how he was treated after Shiloh.
Well, I'm not
You
saying it
know,
was wrong. All I'm saying is
yeah.
that he didn't exactly have a course of,
Well,
cast of
no, I
people
mean,
coming out to save him.
I mean, if
You
you're
know,
the scapegoat for the Battle of Shiloh, which Lew Wallace was, you're not gonna be like, oh, hey, Grant's awesome.
right? But he was defended by Sherman, which we'll come
Yeah.
back later
Oh,
on
yeah.
and talk about that.
Absolutely was.
But
Yeah.
so Rosecrans is going to arrive at Pittsburgh Landing, which is where Shiloh was fought,
Mm-hmm.
on May 23rd, 1862. Now, this is post Shiloh.
Yep.
Okay, Shiloh was a month before. And old Rosie is going to join his old friend and classmate Grant, and he's going to command the right wing of the Department of the Mississippi under the command of John Pope. Now, when Rosecrans and Grant met, and again, they were close at this time, they were friends from school, according to Adjutant John Rawlins. We'll talk about him later on. Grant said, "How are you, Rosie?" and greeted him warmly. Grant is going to later write, Rosecrans is a warm personal friend and one of the ablest and purest men, both in motive and actions. And he also would say after that John Pope had passed over after Grant was passed over by
Yep.
John Pope by Lincoln, when he needed someone to command that Eastern Theater's Army of Virginia in July of 1862, he said he'd only serve under two men, Rosecrans and Sherman.
Yep.
So this goes to show that relationship at the time was still really, really strong.
Well, I think it goes back to probably what happened at West Point. There's kind of that, and I wonder if it was almost like a brother thing, right? Because Rosecrans is, he's a couple years older than Grant, and I think it was almost this respectful. He helped me out, this brother thing that, and same with Sherman. Sherman was like a year older than Grant, so I think Grant saw the two of them, even Rosecrans at this time, and he will see Sherman like this throughout the entire Civil War, but kind of this brother figure, that
Yeah,
that looked out for him.
but I mean, unfortunately, that friendship is gonna kind of end,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gonna lead to basically a lifelong feud between Grant and Rosecrans. Now, it was kind of around this time it was set to begin, unfortunately. So, September of 1862, the federal outpost on the small town of Iuka, Mississippi, which is about 25 miles southeast of Corinth, is going to fall to General Sterling Price, who he'd been ordered there to head towards Nashville from Braxton Bragg as part of that Kentucky expedition we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
right? Price and his 12,000 men, they're going to move into Iuka and await the arrival of a rebel fun lover named Earl Van
Mm-hmm.
Dorn, we've talked about as well, his Army of West Tennessee. Now, the combined forces would certainly be targeting Grant's communications, his lines in that Western Tennessee area, because he wants to help hinder the possibility of Don Carlos Buell's army reinforcing him.
Mm-hmm.
And I would refer you, Mary, to the episode we talked about with Bragg in Kentucky, if you have forgotten, if the mood should strike you. Just saying, okay? Hey, why are you paying attention? But Grant didn't want to wait around, like me on a Friday night back in the day here. He wanted to hit Price in Iuka. He didn't want to sit around. So he came up with a plan to hit Iuka. So there you go. Your little word there.
So bad.
So he's going to use he's going to use two independent federal columns, both approaching Iuka from two different directions. A classic pincer movement, they call it,
Mm-hmm.
designed to force Price, the GTFO, out of the area. Now, one column is going to be commanded by Edward Ord. He's going to have 6,500 men. He was going to hit first from the north and from the west. I'm not going to go into too much detail about Iuka, but just real quick, just telling you how the whole thing went. Okay. The second column is going to be led by Rosecrans, his 9,000 men, who is going to hit second, and he's going to have the responsibility of hitting Price from the south along a road called the Jacinto and the Fulton Roads. Basically, he wanted to stop them from retreating. So Ord's hitting from the north. Mm-hmm. He's going to hit them first. He's going to drive the Southerners south, and then basically Rosecrans and his 9,000 men are going to block them, and they're going to bag them. They're going to force them in, and that's going to be it. That's the plan. So Ord's going to attack, and basically it sounds like a pretty good plan. It does. Everything sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
September 1862, those two columns are on the move, and these Rebs are sitting there. They're completely unsuspecting. It's like a beer by in the back of the fridge, and you see it and has no idea what's going to happen to it, But that's kind of what happens. Now, Ord has 3 divisions, and he's going to take the Memphis and the Charleston Railroad. He's going to get off about 12 miles away from Iuka, where he's going to basically start his march on Sterling Price. Now, Rosecrans has 2 divisions as well. He has to march all the way. He doesn't take the train. And the roads are crappy, and they're marshy, and it's wooded. Grant will be sitting in the headquarters at a place called Burnsville, Mississippi, which is about 10 miles away, or 10 miles away west of Iuka. So they're all close. They're not too far away. Now, the ground separating Rosecrans and Grant is swampy and pretty much unpassable. So both Rosecrans and Ord are going to have to stay in contact with Grant by kind of using the cavalry to send troops messages back and forth.
Yeah, and that's really shitty terrain to send horses over to. And that's the one thing about the Western theater is that, I mean, Eastern theater's got some pretty tough, shitty terrain too, but the Western theater, oh my God, like you hear so many of the soldiers talk about it all the time in their diaries.
No, it's bad, and so it's really a nightmare. We talk a lot of these episodes about terrain and communications. This is no different. This is pretty horrible. The plan for both commanders is to really attack almost simultaneously the next morning. You're going to have Ord hit first, and you're going to have Rosecrans hit second. And this plan is going to go about as well as a Cleveland Indians playoff game. It's just not going to work. It's going to completely fail in the end. Okay. And really it's because of that swampy terrain. Rosecrans is going to be slowed, and he's going to end up going off course, which is going to cause, and he has intel from a local guide who either takes him down the primrose path to get him lost or is lost himself. but whatever happens, Rosecrans is going to be late, and he's going to lead his men astray. So by nightfall on the 18th, now they're supposed to hit the next morning first thing. By nightfall on the 18th, Rosecrans is still about 15 miles southeast of Iuka. And so it wasn't going to happen. That attack wasn't going to happen. Rosie's going to message Grant, and he's going to tell him, that he's didn't make it, that he's going to begin his march to Iuka again the next morning at 4:30. Okay, he's still 15 miles away, and he'll be ready to attack with Ord sometime in the afternoon. That's the plan. That's what he's going to say. So Grant is going to get this message. He's going to be pissed off, understandably, and he's going to have to change his battle plan. Now, he's going to send a messenger, an adjutant named Clark Lagow, to let Ord know. He's going to basically tell him. Now, Lagow, this guy, by the way, is fun too. Later on in Vicksburg, he's the guy who's going to be accused of drinking, and not only that, encouraging Grant to drink.
Yep.
This is like his wingman. He's going to send his drinking buddy. He's like me with you. That's who I am with this, right? So Ord is told not to advance on Iuka unless he saw Rebs evacuating. And for whatever reason, Grant did not notify Rosecrans of these change in plans. When Ord gets his plans, he's told he's going to halt immediately. He's going to say, nope, we're stopping right here. Grant is going to claim later that he did tell Rosecrans that there was a change of plans, but there was no communication from Rosecrans to Rosie that's ever been found. So That, take that for what
Yeah.
it's worth.
Yeah. The whole
So
battle's very. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, no, just kind of the whole thing. So right off the bat, this thing's all screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
So at dawn on the 19th, Rosecrans at 4:30, what's he gonna do? He's gonna start moving towards Iuka, just like he wanted to do. By noontime, okay, he's about 6 miles from the town when he stopped. He's gonna stop for lunch, and Grant's adjutant, that guy Legau, is gonna show up with another guy named Theophilus Dickey, and they're gonna arrive to meet with Rosecrans. Now they're sent from Grant. Now Grant literally changed his plans right in front of these two guys, Legau and Dickey. He did. Originally, Rosecrans was going to split his men at the place called Barnett's Crossroads, and he's going to send 2 brigades east to Cartersville to take that Fulton Road. Now, Rosecrans is going to have to shift his full command north to the Jacinto Road towards Iuka, and then shift east to take that Fulton Road we talked about, to cut off Price's escape route. This all hinged for Rosecrans on Ord attacking at noon as he expected from the day before. So he'd pull that rebel strength north, so he have an easier road, to hit on the south, to open those 2 roads, the Jacinto and the Fulton. That plan works if Ord's going to hit first and force the rebels south, but that doesn't happen. This new plan now kept Rosecrans from splitting up his army, but he had no reason to think that Ord still wasn't planning to attack from the north at noon. Don't forget, Ord is sitting there.
Yep.
He's stopped now. Legau and Dickey sat there with Rosecrans and didn't say a word about the change of plans. Legau himself is going to write to Grant wrote that Grant's updated battle plan was delivered to Ord, which was to halt his advance and attack Iuka after Rosecrans began to attack. So Rosecrans is expecting Ord to attack first. Ord is expecting Rosecrans to attack first. So you can see where this one's going, right? Legau and Dickey asked Rosecrans. They said, "Do you intend to attack it in the afternoon?" And Rosecrans said, "Yup." And he's like, "Okay," because that's what he thought his original order was.
Yep.
Now he's expecting at any time around noon to hear Ord's guns going off. Okay, doesn't hear it. Rosie is basically reminded, that per the order, the main attack was going to begin in the north.
Yep.
And then it was going to enable him to surprise Price in the Savannah. Ooh. Right? That's what he's going to do. That's kind of how it's supposed to. That's how it's supposed to happen. Dickey is going to later write, "Colonel Legau and I were sent by General Grant to visit General Rosecrans and to explain to him the plan of operations." So they're admitting they had the plans. Instead, they rode with Rosecrans literally to the head of the column and didn't say a word of the new plan. And that Ord was to attack only after Rosecrans opened up the fight.
Yep. And it's
Rosecrans didn't know this.
No, and Iuka, like when you look at it, and I mean, I haven't studied it overly in depth. I mean, I looked at it obviously a little bit for this episode from Rosecrans' perspective, also Grant's too, and we are going to be doing an episode on it in the very near future. But it is such a confusing battle because of the miscommunications. It's not, as studied when it comes to, if you read a Grant biography, Iuka does not get a lot of attention, even though I think it's a big part of his history. But like the terrain is really bad. You have these two guys that are supposed to be relaying messages, and it's not happening. And then you also, and we'll get to this, and this is what leads to this rift between Rosecrans and Grant, which is a big part. It's a part of the history of Rosecrans, so you have to talk about it. But there's 30 hours where Grant doesn't communicate, and nobody knows what he's up to.
Right, exactly. And you picture poor Rosie in this situation. He's expecting little resistance, right?
Yep.
And he's thinking he's going to have an easy go of it. So Rosecrans was stunned when he gets to where he's supposed to go, and what does he see? He sees 11,000 rebel troops staring at him and 8 cannon. You can only imagine. Rosecrans was going to later write to his wife, "During this time, not a shot was heard from Ord. So he's riding in there thinking, I'm just going to wait here and wait for the battle. And he sees 11,000 of Price's guys just staring at him.
Mhm.
Oh, shit, right?
Yep.
Dickey and Legau, the two guys, they actually hung around for 30 minutes to watch the battle start instead of racing back to Grant
Oh my
to let him know what the hell was
God.
going on. Now, and it's and it, this is basically this is thinking this is going to give Grant time to perhaps move Ord in, but
Yep.
he doesn't do it because they're going to watch the battle. They're going to sit back, get their popcorn going,
Yep.
and watch the first couple of innings of the game before they head out.
Oh my God.
That's kind of what they do.
It's so bad.
Now, when Dickey and Legau finally head back to Grant's headquarters, guess what? They get lost on the way. Because of course they do. They end up falling down a ravine. Okay. And they finally pull out their F this cards and set up camp for the night. The hell with this is ridiculous.
So they didn't do what
DH
Hill did. DH Hill at
No.
Chickamauga was like, well, I'm just gonna sleep here on the rock.
So as this battle's going on, Rosecrans is going in alone, and he's busier than you at the DQ on a summer's day. And the Rebs succeeded in, guess what? Cutting off Rosecrans' escape route on the Fulton Road. So the whole thing is dogs and cats living together mass hysteria now. The whole thing just went off the rail. The next morning, Rosecrans' battered division wakes up to discover Sterling Price evacuated the dance floor. They took off, and they move south. Rosecrans at this point is going to enter the town of Iuka completely uncontested. And this is where he goes wrong because he doesn't go chase Price down. He sets up camp in the town and says, put my feet up and take it easy. The hell with this. And he's gonna sit in the town. He's gonna wait for word from Ord or Grant. And to your point, he hasn't heard a word from either of them this entire time.
In 30 hours, the only message that is sent from Grant's headquarters is a message to let them know about the Battle of Antietam. And that has been signed by staff officers for Grant. So it's not even known if Grant even sent it, but there's a 30-hour gap that we really don't know what Grant was up to.
Yes. Rosie's going to turn to one of his subordinates, David Stanley. We talked about David Stanley before. He's going to turn to David Stanley. He's going to yell, where in the name of God is Grant?
He probably said something different.
Well, probably. He swore, but that's what he wrote down. So Rosecrans had sent a message to Grant through the cavalry, and the messenger arrived at the headquarters in Burnsville right around the same time as Dickey and Legau finally showed up the next morning. They all kind of got there around the same time. And amazingly, this was the first time Grant had heard anything of the previous battle of Iuka. And this is probably around 10 o'clock in the morning now. At one point, at this point, Grant is going to order Ord, say that 3 times fast, to get your ass to Iuka, ASAFP. Get down there. And when Ord arrives finally, Rosecrans was pissed. You can only imagine the colorful adjectives and adverbs thrown at him. He's going to say to Ord, why did you leave me in the lurch? And at that point, Ord is going to hand him the revised plans from Grant that he hadn't seen before. And he's going to go, okay, well, this is interesting because this is completely different. Predictably, Rosie lost it. And this began that lifetime feud with Grant because he never forgave him for this.
No.
Because he was left holding his diaper in the rain.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
And nobody would kind of back down from what happened either. Nobody would be like, oh, it was his fault or whatever. Nobody's going to say it was all miscommunication because of the train, because of whatever. But also, it doesn't help that Grant disappears for 30 hours and nobody knows where he is.
Well, I mean, who knows? But Ord, though, was just 4 miles away the entire time. Yeah. He's going to claim he didn't hear the battle because there was an acoustic shadow.
The acoustic shadow.
And that's probably true because it happens a lot. But he did say he saw the smoke rising from Iuka and assumed it was Price burning all his materials while he was retreating the town. So who the hell knows? But if you're Rosecrans, you have questions. I've got questions.
Yeah, I would have questions.
I mean, and these are questions to this day still exist. One, why didn't Ord attack? Okay. Why didn't Grant update? Why wasn't he updated as the attack was underway? Why did Grant alter his plans and not notify him? That's a big one, right? And another big one, why the hell didn't Colonel Lego and Dickey not tell him of the change while they were visiting with him?
Yep.
Your guess is as good as mine with these ones, but that's a communication issue that we're dealing with here. Grant assumed zero blame for any of it.
Mm-hmm.
He told Major General Benjamin Hurlbut, couriers lost the dispatches sent to me from Rosecrans, which was later proven to be completely untrue.
Yep.
Grant is going to write to his sister Mary about Iuka. Another Mary. They're all over the place. He's going to write, I have no more to do with troops under Ord than I had under Rosecrans, but gave orders to both knowing the nature of the ground, direction of the wind, and General Rosecrans having been so far behind where he was expected to be on the morning for the attack, it failed. So what does he do? He throws Rosie under the bus for it.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. And in 1874, Rosecrans is living in, I think he's in California at this time, and it's the 11th anniversary of the Battle of Chickamauga, but it's also the 12th anniversary of the Battle of Iuka. And what does he say to his wife? He starts talking about how could Grant just leave me, and then he says to his wife, how could Grant lie about it?
Well, that's the thing too, and it wasn't like this wasn't a 100% to 0%, type of faction in the North
No.
either. There was a lot of anti-Grant sentiment
There
from
was
this.
at the time.
Now there's not did Grant not hear it? Possibly and probably. Did he not know what was going on? Was it communication? Who the hell knows? I don't. Rosecrans' account is probably not 100% true either. But
No.
the reality is, Grant, Rosecrans, for whatever reason, felt that he was left alone, and a lot of other troops were pissed at Grant about this as well. A captain from Missouri, he's going to write. And this guy obviously doesn't like Grant. He's going to write, General Grant was dead drunk and couldn't bring up the army. I was so mad when I first learned the facts that I could have shot Grant if I saw him.
Oh my
if
God.
I wouldn't have been hung the next minute. So he was pretty pissed off.
Pretty passionate about it. Wow.
But this is going to lead to a story in a pair of newspapers in Cincinnati about this. The Cincinnati Commercial is going to accuse Grant of being drunk in an op-ed from a writer named William Bickham, who openly hated him anyway. So take that with a grain of salt. And then the Cincinnati Gazette, right?
Yep.
Now, they've been all over Grant's in Shiloh.
Yeah, Whitelaw Reid is the specific reporter that is writing that.
Right. And he's going to write a hatchet job story on U.S. Grant, so he didn't like him. And he was also close friends with Rosecrans. Yep. Now, most in the Army felt Rosecrans was the source of both newspapers' stories against Grant. And that's, for whatever truth, that's how it's going to believe. Grant supporters certainly came out to support Grant. Colonel Mortimer Leggett, talked about him before. He wrote, I've been vexed and pained of late of the effort to strengthen the unjust prejudice against Grant. General Rosecrans is an excellent officer, and I hope he is not party in this hellish attempt to ruin General Grant, but the evidence is such that he is privy to the whole devilish scheme.
Yep.
That's what he's going to write.
And I think Leggett is also the one that goes to John Rawlins and starts telling him about this. And instead of going to Grant, Rawlins goes to Julia and is like, here's what's going on. And Rawlins starts spinning this thing to her. Oh, I shouldn't say spinning, but just he starts kind of saying, maybe you can tell Grant to have to relieve Rosecrans. That's what he starts putting to her. So at this point, there is very much a anti-Rosecrans faction and an anti-Grant faction in the Western Theater, and it started over what happened at Iuka.
Yeah, there's no question. And for the most part, Grant was, he was pissed at Rosecrans as well for, like I said before, not pursuing Price's Confederates and instead of parking his hindquarters at Iuka. Rosecrans had a habit, he did, of prioritizing territory instead of over armies, which was it continued all the way through his career. We saw later on, especially at Stones River, when he sat there for 6 months afterwards.
And the obsession with getting Chattanooga, of getting
and he did. So this is Rosecrans is no angel with this either, but you can see the factions forming with this. Grant wanted Price's army destroyed, and failing to do so at Iuka, as he also did in Corinth, by the way. Speaking of that, it added fuel to that personal fight between the two that just kept going and going and going.
Yep.
Right. Now, Rosecrans did a lot of things on his own accord too, without Grant's permission. He gave away promotions to people
Yep.
without authorization. He also freed rebel prisoners without authority, and
Hmm.
that was another thing that pissed Grant off.
Yep.
He was doing this. It was it was Grant who also accused Rosecrans of leaking to those stories to the press, not the two Cincinnati ones, but also other stories, about drinking, about army
Yep.
placement, and this is when Rosecrans finally lost. The shoes
Oh
fell off his
yeah.
cracker with this when he finally said, "I'm done with this,"
Yep.
and he's going to write a letter to Grant that isn't going to be too happy either.
No, and he basically like he just says, "How can you say this about me? This isn't, you know, this isn't what I've done. It's not what my staff has done." And he just finally lays it out for Grant like this is not how it went,
Yeah,
you
he
know?
writes, to the part which refers to newspapers and leaky members of my
Yeah.
staff, I answer that there are no headquarters less responsible for what newspaper correspondents say of my operations. And then he writes, to the affairs of Iuka and Corinth, I am forced to say that if you do not meet me frankly with a declaration that you are satisfied, I shall consider my power to be useful in this department ended. This is a relationship that was heading toward divorce so fast that even J Lo would have been shocked. That's all, okay.
Yeah, it is so just, and Grant said as a Grant said of him as a subordinate, I found I could not make him do as I wish. So basically saying, well, Rosecrans isn't following my orders. And Grant, I think in some ways, like he was kind of, it's like, okay, is he determined to relieve him of duty because of this? It's around this time after Corinth, which that's October 3rd to 4th, 1862. It's a victory, but again, they lose the Army of West Tennessee, which is led by Earl Van Dorn. Rosecrans takes Corinth, but Grant's not happy with that because it's like that's in his mind, his philosophy behind the war. It's not about taking these places. It's about bagging the army. So why didn't you bag the Army of Western Tennessee?
And that's I think Grant really saw that most other generals
Yes,
did.
that's where he was
And
kind of ahead of the game on
right,
stuff. Is that?
and Lincoln would pound his head saying, you're, and you saw it later on with other battles, but
Yep.
Grant had the foresight of knowing
Mm-hmm.
that the enemy was the army. It was not the land. It was not the territory. But you know what you do when you want to get rid of somebody in real life here. You know what you promote them, right?
Yep. And Rosecrans, he gets promoted, and he's made commander of the Army of the Cumberland.
Right.
And so he's gonna go, but before he does that, he goes to meet with Rosecrans. And at that meeting, I think Rosecrans kind of comes away thinking the issue has been resolved between the
It
two of
was. I
them.
mean,
That Rosecrans has finally said, "Look, I'm not going to talk to the newspaper reporters, and neither are my staff. So please stop accusing me of that."
no, it was. I mean, they were both happy to be moving on from each other.
Yep.
Sherman, he's going to write. Grant was relieved as much as disappointed in him. He was
Mm-hmm.
happy that he was going.
Yep.
Um,
Sherman was
and
also
so
shocked at what had happened too.
yeah, yeah. And so it's interesting. So you mentioned that meeting when Rosecrans stopped by, and he went there to defend himself and basically say everything you're hearing is not true. He specifically pointed out that Mortimer Leggett quote and
Mm-hmm.
say this is ridiculous. But Grant, he whatever for whatever reason, he basically said, he said Rosie felt that he said Grant told him that his behavior was he was perfectly satisfactory,
Mm-hmm.
but he's like, and so that they felt like Rosie that things were okay, but Grant clearly wasn't. They
No.
kind of was one of those, how are you doing? I'm fine. I get that a lot. One of those deals, right?
What?
And it sounds like maybe it's probably not fine, but that's how you feel.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Rosie felt it was fine. Probably didn't get a whatever. He probably just got I'm fine. But that's kind of what happened. But Rosecrans finds himself now, Mary, in charge of a huge army, the
Yeah.
Army of the Cumberland. And he has an outstanding set of subordinates with him. He's got George Thomas,
Who he's
he's got
very good friends with.
right? Alexander Chucklehead McCook, he's got
Yep.
the old Chucklehead with him,
Yep.
as well as Thomas Crittenden, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he was implored by Lincoln, for the love of God, I need fighters. And the expectation is that you are going to fight and you're going to attack Braxton Bragg's Army of the Tennessee as soon as you can. Now, this is going to result in the Battle of Stones River on December 31st of 1862, which we did a whole story on this one a long time ago. But it was a much-needed Union victory at the time, coming off of a bloodbath of Antietam, slow crawl of Grant heading into Vicksburg. And it was a victory. Some people say it wasn't, but it was.
Grant allegedly, he says it was not a victory. I believe that is what is recorded in Gideon Wells's diary from the meeting that happened on April the 14th, 1865. What happened there is Lincoln is talking about a dream he had, and he said, "Oh, it's the same dream I've had before these victories." And he mentioned Stones River, and Grant is sitting there. He's like, "Stones River was not a victory," and it's recorded in Gideon Wells's diary. So it's allegedly he said that, but I mean, my opinion is Stones River is a victory because they prevent the Confederates from taking Nashville. Because if the Confederates had taken Nashville, that would have been a whole other shit show to deal with on top of Vicksburg. But the one thing that does happen at Stones River that we do need to mention that is going to play into the Battle of Chickamauga is that at Stones River, Rosecrans is going to be out riding with his friend Garash, who is also part of the army. And Garash is going to get hit by a cannon and killed instantly in front of Rosecrans. And Rosecrans is so close to him, he has his blood splattered all over his jacket. And Rosecrans will cut the buttons off that jacket and carry those buttons around with him for the rest of his life, because that was one of his best friends, and he's killed in front of him. And that is going to play into something that happens to him at the Battle of Chickamauga that we will talk about.
Yeah, and just Julius Peter Garash. He was from Cuba, but he was Catholic, just like Rosecrans was. So he had a special kinship to him, and obviously that was the downside of this. But Rosecrans had a lot of good publicity after the battle, so it plays into that. If Grant didn't feel it was a victory, everybody else seemed to. Harper's Magazine, they wrote about this. They said the strategist Grant, the strategist Rosecrans has proved himself second to none. The New York Times wrote, whatever his future may be, it cannot be denied that at present General Rosecrans stands at the very head of all Union generals. So the press loved Rosecrans after Stones River. For Rosecrans, it was obviously a bittersweet thing. For Garash, this was his first time he'd seen battle. This is the first time he saw this. After he died, William Hazen is going to pull his West Point ring off of him, and his Bible is going to give it to Rosecrans. So you can imagine the sadness of this.
But you have to keep. But Rosecrans couldn't, like, when it happened, he had to keep going. And the one thing about Rosecrans at Stones River, as much as Sheridan is one of the ones that does kind of save the day for the Union, he's the one fighting against Claiborne, on that road. But Rosecrans is out riding on the front lines, encouraging the troops after he's seen his friend get killed. And that's that's something right there about who he was as a commander, I think.
Yeah, I mean, who knows to what extent that death affected him personally, and by all accounts, it affected him deeply, and likely stayed with him for the rest of his life, and certainly the rest of his military career.
Well, he carries the buttons around with him from that jacket that he was wearing when he was shot.
And by this point, these guys have seen a lot of death and a lot of things happen, and so that personal death of Julius Garash was a big deal, but what happens after the battle? Rosecrans, again, he's not going to pursue Bragg, but choose to set up that winter camp in Murfreesboro we talked about. He's going to sit there for a long time, for 6 months, and so that's going to drive people like Lincoln crazy. And it wasn't until that Tullahoma campaign did Rosecrans' army finally chase Bragg into Georgia. But again, he failed to destroy Bragg's Army of Tennessee, and it's going to cost him dearly letting him get off the mat this time. Right?
It is. And I mean, the Tullahoma campaign, and you remember we did some episodes about it
with John Wilder.
Yeah, John Wilder.
Lightning Brigade.
Minty and Wilder. Yeah, they were in it. June 24th to July 3rd, 1863. It's considered to be one of the most brilliant campaigns of the Civil War. Lincoln would refer to it as the most splendid strategy I know. and it's very low casualties. It forces Bragg to retreat back to Chattanooga. It's when we see kind of the formation of Wilder's Lightning Brigade that will perform so well, along with Minty, at the Battle of Chickamauga. We have the mounted infantry coming about during this. Wilder goes off on a raid and comes back with no casualties. It's really quite an interesting campaign to study, but it is something that I don't think Rosecrans gets enough credit for. But again, he's not, you know, the criticism is he has not bagged that Army of Tennessee. He's just driven, what he's done is he's driven Bragg into Chattanooga. But
Right.
now the goal after Tullahoma is how do we get Chattanooga? Because Chattanooga, as we've talked about many times, that is what Lincoln saw as being the most important city in the Confederacy at the time. You have Vicksburg being taken, and Lincoln saw Vicksburg as the key. Um, and once Vicksburg was taken, Lincoln said the father of waters now flows on Vex to the sea. So they have that. The next city to get is Chattanooga, because if you get Chattanooga, you're going to get Atlanta, and so on. You're going to get into the heartland of the Confederacy.
Hmm. And he also has Bragg over a barrel heading into that late summer of
Yep.
1863. Bragg and his Army of Tennessee is reeling. I mean, the series of defeats they have, they got the political infighting going on that's going to come out worse down the road. But he's dealing with all this crap. Um, just just as Rosecrans' army was with the Cumberland. I mean, Army of the Cumberland, same kind of deal. Bragg will focus his army in a place called Lafayette, Georgia,
Yep.
instead of spreading them out throughout Tennessee and Georgia. His plan is, we're not going to talk the total details of the battle with Chickamauga, but his plan is basically to cross the Chickamauga Creek to defeat Rosecrans and recapture the city of Chattanooga. In a nutshell, that's pretty much it.
Yep.
But thanks to a pissing match back east between Robert E. Lee and James Longstreet, Longstreet is going to be sent west to join Bragg's army.
Like that
And
the pissing match.
right, because
So is D.H. Hill.
yeah, so he'll have a division of John Bell Hood, and our old friend Bushrod Johnson will be back in town. And what this does, it evens the tilt now. So the Confederates actually have more men.
Yep.
65,000 to 60,000. So the balance is now you got a strong commander in Longstreet, you got a fighter in Hood, D.H. Hill, Bushrod. You have some good players on the field now. And Rosecrans is going to sniff out this plan, though. He's going to figure out Bragg's plan. But again, we have the whole thing with the first day with the Lightning Brigade and
Minty
John
and Wilder basically force Bragg to change his
Right.
plan. But the problem is Rosecrans, he does get a little bit arrogant going into Chickamauga by spreading his army out too thin. And Thomas, his very good friend, has been telling him, "Oh no, you don't want to do that." And he's right. Like he gets them spread out too thin. But Minty and Wilder, what they do on that first day of Chickamauga on September the 18th, 1863, is they slow Bragg down enough, and also they force him to alter his plan. But Rosecrans kind of the way it's been described in one book I read, it's like kind of leapfrogging his army back to
Mm-hmm.
Chattanooga, because at that point you just have Crittenden for the Union sitting in Chattanooga, and they need them all back there. So September 19th, they're all back there, and that's kind of the second day of the Battle of Chickamauga.
Yeah. By the highlight, of course, is September 20th.
September
That's going to be
20th
the big day.
is the day where this is where it literally and figuratively collapses for Rosecrans, and this is kind of the major event in his military career that is it sadly does lead to kind of his demise in the military. But September 20th, 1863 is known as the breakthrough, and that's because Thomas J. Wood is ordered to close up and support General Joseph J. Reynolds' division in order to fill what is an assumed gap. Except there is no gap. And Wood gets this order, and he's standing around with it, and he's like, WTF, And, people around him are saying, dude, you've got to obey this because you're one step away from being court-martialed. Because the thing with Wood is Wood was kind of like, he had a big mouth. He spoke out against his his commanding officers and all this other stuff. But Rosecrans had went and dressed him down that morning, I think, and basically been like, dude, you need to like calm the fuck down, and like, just Wood had done something that had pissed Rosecrans off. And, Rosecrans is the type of guy, he got pissed off, but then within like 5 minutes, he's like, oh, I'm fine. Everything's cool. Like, let me buy you a beer kind of thing. But Wood had been
But
dressed down.
he had to, he could, at this
He
point,
couldn't, he couldn't disobey it.
He
He was
had
like,
to.
all right, I'm going to do it. Fine. He had to move it was his division, right?
And Wood knew it was a mistake, and
Yep.
by doing that, by moving his army to fill a gap, what he did is he created a gap,
Yep.
and that went from there, and so this gap it's going to lead to John Bell Hood.
Hood breaks
He
through
he
it.
breaks through that and he breaks through that gap faster than the time it takes for Joe Burrow to score against Buffalo. That's how quick it is. He goes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so he bursts right through, and what happens is Chickamauga now turns into that disaster for Rosecrans because his men, they're driven from the field towards the town. You have George Thomas. He's going to have his famous stand at Snodgrass Hill and Horseshoe Ridge, but the writing's on the wall at this point. Now, Thomas's men are holding the line, so the other men can evacuate to Chattanooga, including Rosecrans, who I don't want to say criminally was not up front. He went to Chattanooga and he went to the town. He wasn't up front with his men. And that's not good because and that's going to ultimately be a huge mistake by Rosecrans, both professionally and personally now.
Yeah. And the thing is that order that Wood got, we don't 100% know who wrote that order. It probably wasn't Rosecrans. My opinion, it might have been Garfield, but we don't know.
It could have been someone on Garfield's staff. It could have been an adjutant.
Yeah, because Garfield does throw Rosecrans under the bus.
At the end of the day, whoever wrote that order Wood had no choice but to obey it.
Yeah.
And so the fog of war. The flash of battle. Who the hell knows? But after Chickamauga, it's going to set down a domino of effects now. That's not going to end well for Rosie. Joseph Hooker, good masshole Mary from Massachusetts. He and his 15,000 men are going to be ordered to Chattanooga by Edwin Stanton. He's also going to send U.S. Grant to send an additional 20,000 men under William Sherman, who had been in Vicksburg. Now they're all converging on Chattanooga. Oh, and by the way, Mary, he wants Grant to go to Chattanooga personally.
Yep.
And he's going to give him the option of keeping Rosecrans or getting rid of Rosecrans. I will give you $1 if you tell me what you think he did.
You're fired.
He got fired, okay? Grant still has a raging hate on for Rosecrans at this point, and he has actual cause to get rid of him. He's going to dump Rosecrans' army of the commander of the Cumberland, and he's going to replace him with George Thomas. And Thomas is going to do his thing. Big surprise, shocker of all shocker.
No, but imagine that, like, Thomas is so close with Rosecrans, and imagine being Thomas in that position and like, okay,
Well, he was a logical choice, though. He was the best support.
Absolutely, he was. But I can't imagine personally, thinking of them as a human, like, wow, my one of my close friends just totally got fired, and I got promoted. How does that, how does that play into the situation? That's why I wish. We had more of Thomas's writings to see how he maybe felt about that whole situation. And maybe they are, in the OR or something like that. Maybe there's something that indicates how he felt about that.
Oh, yeah. But Grant's going to send word to Rosecrans that he's been fired. And Rosie's going to be leaving. Rosecrans will be heading north back to Cincinnati, doing his walk of shame back to the Queen City. And around this time Grant is coming down into Chattanooga, and guess what? They're going to bump into each other.
Yeah.
Because of course they are, right? And they're going to talk about Rosecrans' cracker line that he had come up with, that plan with Baldy Smith, and to help break that southern blockade to allow food and supplies to get into the city for the Union troops who were being starved out there. And, and that brings up controversy as well, because that brings up that controversy of who came up with that cracker line plan, which was very, very successful. And most people think it was Rosecrans with Baldy Smith, and some people think it was Grant. Who the hell knows?
My opinion is it was Rosecrans and Baldy Smith, and a little bit of Thomas as well. And then Grant Grant needs a little bit of credit too. I'm sure he was able to somehow tweak it and improve upon it, but to leave Rosecrans out of that is honestly, I think it's unfair because you don't know 100%.
Yeah, I think it's probably it's probably Rosecrans and Smith
Yep.
realistically
Yeah, I
with
think
more
it is
Grant
definitely
enhancing
Rosecrans and
it.
Baldy Smith.
But I mean, Rosecrans, his story doesn't end there, though. It continues.
Nope.
He's going to toil around Missouri for a bit as commander of
Mm.
Department of Missouri in January of 1864. He got to chase around his old Iuka nemesis Sterling Price for the most part, but for the most part, Rosecrans' combat days are over at that
Yep.
point. Despite that, that ignominious end with Grant, Rosecrans is going to actually be considered for political office during this time, Mary. As a
He
matter of
is.
fact, his old Chickamauga friend and former chief of staff, James Garfield,
Yep.
who's running the Ohio presidential delegation, is going to kick Rosie's tires to see if he'd be interested in running as Abraham Lincoln, the guy with the hat, as his vice president nominee in the 1864 election as a Democrat, right?
Yep.
By all accounts, Rosecrans kind of said, well, maybe he has a little bit of interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
He will send a message back to Washington, and for whatever reason, whatever became it, no one knows. But Andrew Johnson, of course, becomes Veep.
Yep.
There were some rumors in Washington, D.C. that none other than Edwin Stanton received the telegram from Rosecrans, and somehow it fell off the truck and no one saw it.
Again, Stanton's shady guy, but I mean, could you imagine how different history might be?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So you get what you pay for, right? On January 15th, 1866, Rosecrans is going to finally be mustered out of the volunteer army. And not long later, he's going to be appointed as U.S. Minister of Mexico by President Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is going to surprise you, Mary, okay? But he held that office until President U.S. Grant took over after he was inaugurated. And guess what U.S. Grant did?
Ousted him.
He fired him again. He fired Rosecrans from the minister position. So
I
there
mean,
you go.
I swear. I mean, I love U.S. Grant. I have a lot of respect for him. Amazing guy. He's one of the reasons, like end of the Civil War, with what he did. But man, when you got in Grant's doghouse, unless your name was Sherman or Sheridan, like sorry, Grant people, but you don't ever get out of that doghouse. I mean, I don't even think. I mean, he kind of apologizes to Lew Wallace's memoirs, but was Lew Wallace ever out of Grant's doghouse?
No, I mean it's not the most unusual thing for a president to replace the previous guy's people.
Yeah, I know, but this looks personal.
I'm sure it didn't break Grant's heart to do so. But by then, Rosecrans was a name, and as a war Democrat, he was approached by a lot of different people to run for office, mostly governors, admittedly, and he said no to everybody.
Yep.
And by this time of his life, he must have been so sick of the bullshit, sick of the politics. He just said no. Anybody who asked said no. As a matter of fact, he earned the nickname of the Great Decliner for saying no so often.
Wow.
A friend of mine in college dated a girl he used to call a Great Decliner too, and I didn't even know she was even into politics. So that's the weirdest thing how that is. But Rosie had different plans though.
Yeah.
Someone told him that California is the place he ought to be, so he loaded up his truck and he moved to Beverly Hills. That is.
Oh my God, so that needs to be a meme.
Rosecrans is going to move to the small town of Los Angeles in 1969, where there must have been plenty of great land because he bought 16,000 acres of it. Ironically, it's not too far from where the LA Rams Super Bowl team play. I mean, the football team plays now, right in that same area. He paid $250 an acre for this land. He paid $40,000, which is about $875,000 today.
Holy shit.
Here's what I want you to do, Mary, when we get done. I want you to call the Century 21 office in LA. They're probably still open.
What?
And say you want to buy 16,000 acres downtown in LA for $875. See what they say to you. Okay, okay. People thought Rosecrans was crazy to buy this land back in the day because there was no natural spring nearby.
Yeah.
They thought it was worthless land, but Rosecrans built his house on it, and he called it Rosecrans Rancho. That's what he called it.
Oh my God, that sounds like a sitcom or something.
Sounds like a bad Mexican place you go.
Rosecrans Rancho.
Make sure go running right for the Pepto after you go to Rosecrans Rancho. But he must have got bored sitting around the beach because in 1880, at age 61, Rosecrans is going to decide to get back into politics again. This time as a state rep, and soon
Mhm.
Rosie found himself elected as the congressman representing the California's first district, beating incumbent Republican, a guy named Horace Davis, by exactly
Yeah.
1,509 votes. Real close at election. So Rosie now is a representative. Back in Washington, he became chairman of the U.S. House Military Affairs Committee, and it's clear that his attitude towards Grant had not softened at all.
No.
No, he had not. So in his role, Rosecrans, he got to do a lot of different things. And what does he do?
He does not vote to give Grant funds.
He publicly opposes a military pension for
Yep.
Grant. Grant at this time saw most of his assets depleted. He was living on just $6,000 a year. I know it's a lot more now, even with inflation, but Grant did not have a lot of money. Rosecrans publicly opposed giving him a pension. And according to Rosecrans, he writes of Grant, many of his claims from the war were lies, and he knew they were lies when he
Wow.
made them. That's what he said when he was giving him his pension. So his attempt though failed because the bill passed. Grant got
Yep.
his pension. But finally, after 2 terms, Rosecrans is going to leave Congress in 1884 and return to California again. And he's going to sign on as a regent at the University of California.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to get back in education again. But soon he ends up getting the itch again to get back into U.S. government. He ends up being named registrar of the U.S. Treasury. So he's going to hold that role from 1885 to 1893, which meant that every dollar bill that was issued in that time had his name on it.
Oh,
So if you look at the dollar
wow.
bill as a signature on it,
Oh,
that signature is the job Rosecrans had.
that would be so cool to have one of
So you could
those.
look up the bills and get a Rosie autograph, right?
And
But
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so he was getting back into that. So it's pretty simple. I don't know why I think about that, but it's pretty
Yeah.
cool to see the signature on there. That Rosecrans would have been the guy. But
Yeah, and he also going back to Chickamauga, he spoke at a grand reunion of veterans north and south on September 19th, 1889. Delivered a very moving address there. And then a year later, Congress established Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park as the nation's first national battlefield park.
yep.
So that is pretty cool that he had a hand in that, even though that is the battle which was really, kind of, I don't want to say it's his downfall because, my opinion is he had a lot going on at that time. And there was something that President Lincoln said after that battle about Rosecrans, and he said it to John Hay. So I think it was kind of said in private, not meant to be seen by anybody. And of course, because Nicolay and Hay published their papers, it was eventually seen. But Lincoln said that after the Battle of Chickamauga, Rosecrans seemed confused and stunned like a duck hit on the head. And I used to think that was kind of like, oh, that's just Lincoln's sense of humor. But I kind of see it in a way, my opinion, it's more of an insult because I think Lincoln didn't really understand what was going on at the time, like how chaotic things were. But also, I think given what happened to Rosecrans at Stones River with seeing one of his best friends, like Garash, killed in front of him very horrifically, his mental, the tread on his tires had worn down. And it's my opinion that, it wasn't diagnosed at the time, but I think Rosecrans probably did have PTSD at Chickamauga.
Yeah.
And that's why he reacted the way he did. He was also going off of no sleep leading into Chickamauga. But I think if you look at the Rosecrans we saw at something like Rich Mountain, even at something like Iuka, Corinth, and even at Tullahoma, which Lincoln said was, absolutely brilliant. It's not the same Rosecrans we see sit, on September 20th, 1863 at Chickamauga. And I think he takes a lot of criticism for that. But, he had been through a lot by that point, and no doubt all of them had. But I think for him, that was kind of when the tread had worn off. and he probably had PTSD by that point, and it was just kind of
Yeah.
a moment for him where he was like, I can't do it anymore.
Well, there's only so much you can take, but
Yeah.
he does finally does retire for good on September 9th, 1893, and he's going to enjoy those golden years in California. He's going to get an award called the Lattaire Award
Mm-hmm.
from a university in South Bend, Indiana, that shall go nameless, and for an
Notre
outstanding,
Dame.
oh God, for outstanding service from the Catholic Church. In 1896, President Kennedy, JFK, actually got this award too in 1961. You know, down the road a little bit, but he's getting older. In February of 1898, Rosecrans is going to come down with pneumonia, but it seems like he beat it. Everything seemed like he was doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But one of his grandchildren, his name was Rosecrans Toole, the son of his daughter Lily. His name Rosecrans Toole, who unexpectedly died of diphtheria, and by all accounts, the death of his grandson crushed him. This was his final light. This was it. Now, for a man who'd seen so much death in his life, the death of Rosecrans Toole was the final straw.
Yeah.
And William Rosecrans is going to die himself on March 11th, 1898, in Redondo Beach, California. And his body is going to lie in state in Los Angeles City Hall, with a casket is going to be covered with the battle flag from the Battle of Stones River and Chickamauga on it. He's going to be buried in LA, but eventually he's going to be dug up and moved in 1908 to Arlington National Cemetery, where he's still there today. And the thing about him, though, is that his legacy remains truly in the eye of the beholder with this.
Yep.
For some, he's a brilliant inventor, a genius, outstanding soldier and politician. For others, he was a backstabbing opportunist, foul-mouthed, over-pious guy who could carry a grudge, towards Grant as long as he was alive. But for someone like William Rosecrans, it's important to read as many sources as possible with him. And whatever his legacy is really what you want it to be in American history. Because that's what's good about this, is you can read different things, get different perspectives. But for someone like Rosecrans, you have to understand that there's a lot of competing factors in this to push him down,
Yep.
whether real or perceived. And I think that when you look into his details, you realize that he was somebody who could have done a lot bigger things, but for whatever reason, politics, the PTSD thing, if that's true, all of these things held him down and really denied the Union a solid general down the stretch as the war kind of came to an end. And I think I always felt that was kind of sad about him. So I always thought he was somebody who was underappreciated and got the shit end of a stick by a lot of different people.
No, I completely agree with you. I think he definitely did. I think, a lot of, what happened to him is just, it's like, you just need to look more into who Rosecrans was. So read beyond, Grant's memoirs and all that. And also, too, just because, we're saying that Rosecrans deserves more recognition, we're not trying to push Grant down at all. Grant deserves where he is in the historical record. Grant is a victor. He's an amazing general. We just see Rosecrans as, he's up there with him. He's one of the reasons, early on the Union had successes. He's one of the reasons the state of West Virginia was formed. He had early successes in the Civil War. Tullahoma is a brilliant campaign. Stones River, in my opinion, is a victory. And in my opinion, too, Rosecrans is a person who suffered from PTSD, and it got him at Chickamauga. And I think that's why that's what happened to him there, is what happened with the breakthrough, why he wasn't able to deal with it. Because, can you imagine, like, all he saw was a sea of blue coming at him and then a sea of gray. And what do? He ran.
Yeah, and that must have been quite a surprise after the history.
And that's the fog of war, too. Like, we don't know what he was going through at that time either, but I think he's such a fascinating study. He definitely deserves more recognition. He's very underrated. And yes, he had his faults like any of them do. He could be very outspoken. He argued with Stanton over stuff when he was working in Washington, and Stanton did not like him. And I mean, I don't like Stanton at all. So that's where I'll leave it with that. But I mean, Rosecrans is worth a look. And just because you have a high opinion of Rosecrans does not mean that Grant is any less of a general.
No, it doesn't have to be one or the other. But I think
Yeah.
it's as you study these people, you realize every one of these people had backgrounds, they had stories,
Yep.
they all had their things that they had to deal with. And also, the Civil War was a situation where that nobody ever thought they'd be in. You know, even with a West Point background, even graduating fifth in his class, you never know what's coming, and you
No.
never do.
You never know how it's going to affect you either.
It is what it is. So, speaking of affecting us, what's coming up next, Mary?
So next for us is episode 100.
Wow, 100 episodes.
Yeah, we will be episode 100. We will be having a guest, Alexander Rose, author of The Lion and the Fox, which is about Confederate espionage and the Confederate Navy being built in Liverpool, England during the early part of the Civil War. We will be talking about that using the background of his new book. As I said, it's called The Lion and the Fox. So we will be doing that. We will be having our usual YouTube live streams this Saturday and then obviously the following Saturday. And also on February the 18th at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, we will be having a actual in-person hangout at Fourscore in Gettysburg.
Fourscore beer right down there off of Washington Street. So definitely do it. Looking forward to the next episode. We'll get to talk about blockade runners and spies and pirates and all kinds of fun stuff we're going to get to talk about with this 100th episode. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? But Alex Rose is going to be great. Everybody knows him from his book Washington Spies, from AMC's series Turn. If you saw that, you know who he is. And his book is fantastic. It shines a light on a portion of the war that people don't really study. The politics that that took place in England to make England trying to maintain neutrality. And at the same time, the Confederates hoping to use them to build a navy to challenge the blockade. And so it's a fascinating study. We've been wanting to do Navy for a while, so this is a good step in that direction. But I think it'll be a good time. So Mary, again, great time as always. Talk with that old Rosie. Hopefully we did him a little bit of justice. And off to the next one. So looking forward to it. So any last words from you, Fincheroo?
Well, thanks everybody for listening to this episode and supporting us for 99 episodes now. I don't know how we got here. We wouldn't actually. It wouldn't be it wouldn't be if we didn't have our awesome listeners as well as you, Darren.
Well, I got 99 problems, and you and our listeners are not one of them, Mary. So off we go.
Wow.
How about that? Okay. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. Long day for us, Mary. Long night, but we're going to shut this down and call it a day. So everybody, thanks for listening. We look forward to see you on the live. Looking forward to the next episode when we hit triple digits. Episode 99 is in the books, and we are about to hit 100. So thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you all on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.